The bathroom door creaked open at 2 a.m., and Marcus Chen froze. There, curled up on the heated tile floor beside his bathtub, wrapped in what looked like hotel towels, was a woman. Her dark hair fell across her face, and for a moment, his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Then she shifted slightly, and the dim light from the hallway caught her profile. His breath stopped. Sarah. Marcus stood in the doorway of his luxury suite at the Grand Meridian Hotel in downtown Chicago, staring at the woman he'd married 15 years ago, the woman he hadn't seen in over a decade. His ex-wife was sleeping on his bathroom floor. The previous evening had been unremarkable. Marcus had checked into the hotel after a grueling week of business meetings, looking forward to nothing more than a hot shower and the king-sized bed waiting for him. He'd barely noticed the cleaning cart in the hallway or the woman in the standard-issue uniform who'd smiled politely as he'd passed. Now, as he looked down at Sarah's sleeping form, he realized that had been her. She looked so different from the vibrant young woman he'd known. Her face was thinner, lined with exhaustion that went deeper than a long shift. Her hands, visible where they clutched the towel around her shoulders, were red and chapped. The wedding ring she used to wear was gone, replaced by calluses. Marcus's first instinct was to wake her, to demand an explanation. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she was sleeping, the deep, desperate sleep of someone who hadn't felt safe or warm in too long. Instead, he quietly grabbed a blanket from the closet and draped it over her, then retreated to the bedroom, leaving the bathroom door slightly ajar. He didn't sleep. How could he? His mind raced through their history like a film reel stuck on repeat. They'd met in college, two kids with big dreams and empty pockets. She'd been studying to be a teacher, he'd been obsessed with technology startups. They'd married right after graduation in a ceremony so small it fit in his parents' living room. For 3 years, they'd been happy, or so he'd thought. Then his company took off. Suddenly, there were 18-hour days, constant travel, and an obsession with success that left room for little else. Sarah had tried to talk to him, tried to make him see what he was losing, but he'd been too intoxicated by achievement to listen. One morning, he'd woken up to a note on the kitchen counter: "I can't be invisible anymore. I'm sorry. I hope you find what you're looking for." He'd told himself he was relieved. He'd thrown himself even harder into work, building an empire while telling himself it was what he'd always wanted. Now, 12 years later, that empire felt hollow. As dawn broke, Marcus heard movement in the bathroom. He sat up, unsure of what to say, how to bridge the impossible gap between who they'd been and who they were now. Sarah emerged, her face pale with shock and something that looked like shame. She was fully dressed in her uniform, the hotel blanket folded neatly over her arm. "Marcus." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I'll go. I'll turn in my resignation today. It was so cold, and I didn't think anyone was checking into this room until tomorrow, and I just needed a few hours where I wasn't." She stopped, her composure cracking. "Wait," Marcus said, standing. "Please. Just wait. Sit down." She shook her head, already moving toward the door. "I can't. This is mortifying. I should never have." "Sarah, when did you last eat a real meal?" The question stopped her. She turned, tears now visible in her eyes. "That's not your concern. When did you last sleep in a bed?" "Marcus, please," he said, and the word came out more broken than he'd intended. "Please just sit down. Let me order breakfast. Then you can leave if you want. But please, just give me an hour." Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was something in his voice that reminded her of the boy he used to be, but Sarah slowly sank into the chair by the window. Over coffee and room service, which she initially refused but eventually accepted, the story came out in pieces. After their divorce, she'd finished her teaching degree, but budget cuts had eliminated her position after just 2 years. She'd worked a series of jobs, each one paying less than the last. A medical emergency, her mother's cancer treatment, had wiped out her savings. Then COVID hit, and she'd lost everything. The teaching job she'd finally landed had evaporated. Her apartment had gone next. "I've been living in my car for 4 months, she said, staring into her coffee cup. "The hotel hired me 6 weeks ago. Night shift pays a little more, and sometimes, in the luxury suites that aren't occupied, I can take a real shower, feel warm for a few hours. I know it's against the rules. I know it's wrong, but I was just so tired of being cold. Marcus felt something break inside his chest. While he'd been building his fortune, accumulating houses and cars and meaningless achievements, the woman he'd once promised to cherish had been sleeping in her car, stealing moments of warmth in other people's bathrooms. "I'm the one who should be sorry," he said quietly. "For everything. For choosing success over you. For being so blind I couldn't see what mattered until it was gone." Sarah shook her head. "We were kids. You didn't owe me. I owed you everything," Marcus interrupted. "You were my partner, and I abandoned you for a dream that turned out to be pretty empty." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 12 lost years between them. "What can I do?" Marcus finally asked. "How can I help?" Sarah stood, gathering her dignity like armor. "You don't need to do anything. This isn't your responsibility." But it was. Not because of their past, but because she was a human being in need, and he had the means to help. More than that, he wanted to. Not out of guilt or obligation, but because seeing her again had reminded him of something he'd forgotten in his climb to the top: that success meant nothing if you didn't use it to lift others up. Over the next few weeks, Marcus didn't just offer Sarah money, though he did help her find a safe apartment and covered the first 6 months of rent. He used his connections to get her interviews at several private schools. He introduced her to a friend who ran a nonprofit supporting women experiencing homelessness, and Sarah eventually became a volunteer, then a counselor, using her own experience to help others. But more than the practical help, Marcus gave her something else: his time. They met for coffee weekly, rebuilding a friendship from the ruins of their marriage. They talked about their mistakes, their regrets, their hopes for becoming better people. Marcus cut back his work hours, started volunteering at a homeless shelter, and discovered that the feeling of helping someone find housing brought him more satisfaction than closing any business deal ever had. 6 months later, on a cold Chicago evening, Marcus and Sarah stood outside that same hotel, watching as the city lit up against the darkening sky. "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "For seeing me that night. For not just walking away." Marcus shook his head. "Thank you for letting me help. For giving me a chance to be the person I should have been all along." They weren't getting back together. Some chapters, once closed, are meant to stay that way. But they'd found something perhaps more valuable: a second chance at humanity, at kindness, at remembering that we're all just people trying to find our way through the cold. As they parted ways, heading to their separate homes, Marcus realized that finding Sarah sleeping on his bathroom floor hadn't been a coincidence. It had been a wake-up call, a reminder that the true measure of success isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away, and who you choose to become when faced with someone else's need. In helping Sarah rebuild her life, Marcus had rebuilt his own soul. And in a world that often feels too cold, they'd both found a way back to warmth.